Alright, hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the next video. Today we're going to be talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. This is going to be the last bit of new information before our next summative assessment. So you're watching this probably on Monday or Tuesday, which means that our summative assessment is going to be next week on Monday or Tuesday. Okay, we'll spend Thursday and Friday doing some review in class, working on a study guide, and then we'll have the assessment next week. Okay, so the objective for today is for you to be able to identify different regions of the electromagnetic spectrum and to discuss how their energy, frequency, and wavelength relate to one another. So specifically, I want you to be able to identify the colors of the visible spectrum, to be able to sort those colors according to their relative energies, frequencies, and wavelengths. And towards the end of the video, we're going to be learning how elements can be identified using line spectra, and so that'll make a little bit more sense once we get to the end of the video. Okay, so first of all, what is the electromagnetic spectrum? You may have heard of it before, but just in case you haven't, the electromagnetic spectrum is the complete range of all types of electromagnetic radiation. Okay, common types of radiation that you may have heard of before are visible light. This is the type of light that we can see with our eyes. Infrared. This is the type of radiation that's used for night vision goggles. Ultraviolet. This is the type of radiation that can come from the sun that can give you a sunburn. X-rays, we know what those are used for. And then radio waves. So like television and radio stations in the car, the information can be transmitted through radio waves. So each type of radiation is a part of the electromagnetic spectrum, but each type has a different range of energies, frequencies, and wavelengths that make it different from the other types. Here's a picture that shows some of these types. So you can see here that the energy and wavelength is labeled. I'm going to talk more about that later. Mainly, I just want to show you that the electromagnetic spectrum is just one big range, and there's different categories inside of the one big range. Okay, so radio waves are really long wavelengths with low energy. Infrared is sort of the next highest energy, shorter wavelengths. Visible light, this is the only type of radiation that we can see with our eyeballs. Okay, it's actually a very, very tiny portion of the overall spectrum. And then you get to ultraviolet, X-rays, and even gamma rays. These are really, really high energy, short wavelength bits of radiation that are mainly produced in like outer space, for example. Okay, so what exactly is radiation? So electromagnetic radiation is just a form of energy that travels at the speed of light, and it comes in distinct little packets called photons. Okay, so a photon is a piece of radiation that travels at the speed of light. The amount of energy in a photon can be different. Okay, for example, X-ray photons have more energy than radio wave photons. We're going to be focusing today completely on visible light, okay? The type of radiation that our eyes can see. Visible light is registered as different colors in our brain. The different colors correspond to different amounts of energy. And in fact, that's kind of how it works. The molecules in your eyeball that pick up the photons, the electromagnetic radiation, depending on the amount of energy that they detect, your brain interprets that as a different color. And so that's how you see different colors. People that are colorblind, for example, their molecules in their eyeballs are unable to distinguish between two different types of energies. So that's why some people may get red and green mixed up, because when the radiation enters their eyeball, the molecules in their eye can't tell the difference between those two different types of photons. So that's kind of how a color blindness works. Obviously, it can be a little bit more complicated than that, but that's roughly how it works. So, visible light is traditionally thought of as a range from red to violet. Okay, and so I do want you to be able to recall these different colors. Okay, I like to use the acronym ROY-G-BIV. Okay, and this stands for red, orange, yellow. Okay, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Indigo, kind of hard to know what color that is exactly, but just think of it as sort of the color in between blue and violet. Okay, so that would be blue, indigo, and violet all over here. Okay. Each photon or each little packet of radiation has a specific energy, frequency, and wavelength. Okay. One other goal for today is that I want you to understand how these relate to one another. Okay. Energy and frequency are directly proportional to each other. Okay. So as you can see here on this little diagram, energy and frequency increase towards the violet end of the spectrum. Okay. So as you get higher in energy, that also means you're getting higher in frequency. You can think of it as, imagine this this wave moving, right, from like left to right. Imagine it moving through space. Frequency is the number of waves or the number of cycles that pass by in a second. That's what frequency is. So as these get scrunched up closer and closer together, that means higher frequency and higher energy. But that means short wavelength, okay? So wavelength is kind of actually the opposite. Wavelength increases towards the red end of the spectrum, okay? So long wavelengths correspond to low frequencies and low energy, whereas short wavelengths correspond to high frequency and high energy, okay? All right, so why is this useful? Why are we talking about this? Scientists can use information about radiation to identify different elements, okay? For example, scientists can tell which types of elements exist in our sun by analyzing the light that comes from the sun towards Earth. Different elements emit different kinds of light. So here's an example that shows the three different elements and the type of light that they emit. Hydrogen is a very simple atom. It's only got one proton and one electron. I'm not going to get into all the details here today, but basically hydrogen is only capable of producing a few different colors of light. Okay, the element itself is only capable of producing a few different colors. Kind of like a red color here. This might be sort of like an indigo color, and then a violet color. All right. Helium is a bit more complicated, 2 protons and 2 electrons, so it can produce more colors. And then carbon is even more complicated, so it can produce more colors than those two put together. Okay. What scientists are able to do is they are able to look at the sun or another star, for example, look at the different types of light that are produced by the sun, and if they see these specific colors, that can serve as evidence that that particular element is present in the sun. Okay? So, like I said, when scientists look at the light emitted by our sun, they see colors of light produced by large elements such as sodium and calcium and others. Okay? This proves that our sun, which is only big enough to produce hydrogen and helium, it has to be a second or third generation star. Okay? In other words, our sun contains the leftovers of a bigger star that lived and died before our sun existed. Okay? If you think back to the video or to the lesson from last week, stars have to be pretty big in order to make big elements, right? Our sun is pretty small. Our star is pretty small, so it can only produce hydrogen and helium. However, we can tell that there are other big elements that are in our sun that our sun can't produce. So that means that our sun has to contain the leftovers from a bigger star that lived and died before our sun existed. And so that's why we know that our sun is a second or third generation star, due to that evidence there. Okay, that is it for this lesson. You're just going to have a few questions to answer for me in Canvas about this, and like I said, this is the last bit of new content for us before we start reviewing for our test at the beginning of next week. Thanks for watching.